How's everybody doing this morning? Good? Well, I can tell you we are excited to be here this morning. I'd like to welcome my fellow panelists on stage. We're gonna have a good discussion for you all this morning. We've been talking about it for a little bit. We've been brainstorming. We know that this is a topic that's gonna be front of mind for a lot of folks. So I'll let everybody have a seat. And why don't we start with just doing a few introductions. So Danielle, do you want to start first, and then Rashida?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning. I'm Danielle Estrada. I lead our consulting services for the Northeast region at Microsoft. So what does that mean? I am charged with selling people, selling services. So we have an amazing brand and product set, right? And so our product team gets all of our licensing out there, and my job is to provide the people resources that can help customers along their digital transformation journey. I've been at Microsoft for almost 6 years. I am also a wife, and in August, celebrated 30 years of marriage to the love of my life. Yep. I have 2 amazing kids, a son who's 20 years old, a junior in college, and then I have a 15-year-old spicy mini-me who is gonna take over the world just like her mom is trying to take over the world in her way. I am also a professor at Georgetown University. And that's a little bit about Danielle, and I'll tell you more later.
That's amazing. I learned about you on stage.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Rashida Hodge. I head customer success at Microsoft for data and artificial intelligence portfolio. So essentially, I work with clients when they've committed to our data services to help them realize it, get value from those services, and implement them across their enterprise.
All right, and then finally, I am Mike Jackson. I'm gonna serve as the moderator for the panel. I get to hang out with these cool folks. I am not a salesperson by trade, but play one on TV. I am a general manager in our legal department. I lead a team that's focused on ethics training, as well as just ethics advice to our sales force, to some of our commercial business. And so I work very closely with our sales teams and work very closely with our teams that are also responsible for generative AI at Microsoft. So should be a good discussion this morning. So I wanted to begin the discussion by just, and this is a conversation that we've had a little bit over the last few weeks, that while AI has had this sort of huge moment, this ramp up this last year, it's not a net new concept. It's not something that hasn't existed. Rashida, I know you and I have had this conversation specifically. And so, you know, we've had this ramp up with AI this year. We've seen sort of this explosion with it, whether it's with ChatGPT, Bing Chat, got to plug our Microsoft products, or, you know, the announcement we did yesterday around Windows 11 and Copilot. But I thought it might just be helpful to ground us and sort of define the landscape a little bit here. What is it when we talk about, so Rashida, I'm gonna go to you first, give me your title on this. What does it mean when we talk about generative AI? What is generative AI? Can you give us an example of it? And talk a little bit about why it's relevant to sales professionals.
Yeah, that's a lot there. So what I'll first start off by saying is AI isn't new. Like, we've been working on researching AI technology for decades, for more than 50, 60 decades. And so I'll even back it up from generative AI to say from an artificial intelligence perspective, like when you think about it from the perspective of, you know, from a theory and development standpoint, this is computer systems that is, you know, mimicking, replicating human behavior. Plain simple, first point of contact, right? Which is important. And then when I think about AI technologies, I really think about it as an umbrella of technologies because you have machine learning technology where you're looking at relationships of data and insights, which is something we've been doing for a pretty long time. Then there's deep learning, how are you actually, you know, mimicking how the human brain actually works, right? That's deep learning technology. And then you have natural language processing and understanding, vision technology. So I like to really think about artificial intelligence as an umbrella of those technologies. And depending on your use case, depending on the need, you can use those different technologies individually, or you can use them as a collective. So then when we now kind of take a step back and say, okay, now what is generative AI? I like to say the operative word is generative, right? And it's about generating new and unique content. And I think about it in two sort of areas. One is, how do you summarize information based on content that has been provided for you? Or how do I create new content from information that has been provided? For me, that's the real fundamental, two key points of differentiation when we look at generative AI. And we see use cases across the board, whether it's customer journeys. How do we make the customer journey for an application within an industry, within a process, better, easier to be able to use? How do we create content? How do you provide marketing information? I was with a client the other day, and he was talking to me about how he's using it to create bedtime stories for his kids, right? And so, there's creation of content, there's a customer journey, there is, coding applications at Microsoft. We have, these co-pilot, or I like to call them augmentation of skill sets, where to be able to really help you to be able to do, your role better. And so these are all ways that you can apply the technology. I think one of the differences now than before, and I've been in the AI space for 10 to 12 years or so, so I've seen the transition. So it's actually interesting to see that people are excited about it all of a sudden, and it's not just me. So thank you for being excited about it. But I think one of the differences now than before is the accessibility of it and the consumability of the technology. And so before, you would say, I've got to go hire a Microsoft, I've got to go hire a systems integrator, I've got to go build these specific skill sets to have data science teams, within my organization. And now, my 77-year-old aunt thinks she's an AI expert because she uses ChatGPT every day, right? So there's this consumability and accessibility, which is really remove a bit of a barrier of saying, this is real, I can touch it, here is how I can apply it in my daily life. And so while the models are better, the compute is better, I really think the difference is we can all touch it, right? So we are democratizing the technology at a scale that we have never done before.
That's great. Picking up on that piece of sort of the accessibility of it, people being able to use it in different ways. Danielle, I'm curious, how are you and your team leveraging it? I know that you are. I think it'd be interesting for this group to hear.
Sure. So a couple of things. I'm a sales leader, okay? And last year was rough for a lot of us in the technology space. A lot of our companies took some hard hits. We lost thousands and thousands of resources. And I'll tell you, as a sales leader, and I have this conversation with my boss all the time, I'm doing 2 people's jobs, 3 people's jobs. I am busting my tail trying to survive and make it in this space, right? And I am so sick of hearing this term, do more with less, because I'm having to do more with less people, right? Can you feel me, right? I mean, it's a positive, but for me as a people manager, it can become frustrating with as hard as I'm working. But to Mike's question to me, one thing that's allowing me to do more with less is AI, okay? I leverage it in my day-to-day. My team leverages it in our day-to-day. We get together, we're on the phone, we're talking, we're strategizing, we're talking about a specific customer. As soon as I hang up the call, one of my sales specialists is sending a recap of all of the key points about that company, right? What is their strategy? What is their profile? What are the primary targets that we should be focusing in on? Minutes after we hang up the phone. I was in Amsterdam at a conference last week. I was taking notes on my phone with my thumbs. I was taking rough notes, right? While I was talking to the customer, I wanted to be present, so I was taking rough notes. They were super, super sloppy, right? but I wanted to take my notes and I wanted to recap them back to everybody else that wanted to know, oh my gosh, what happened when you talked to this customer? I took my rough, sloppy notes, right? Popped them into OpenAI, right? ChatGPT. And instantly I said, hey, can you take these notes and can you massage them so that I can send them out to the rest of my team? Took my notes and instantly it was like ready that I could send back a recap to the rest of the leaders and everybody else about what it was that we talked about, right? So I'm leveraging it. It's like my virtual assistant. That's how I leverage it. When I'm looking at a new customer, if I'm getting ready to prep to go in to talk to a customer, I have a conversation with ChatGPT. We talk, right? I'm very, intimate with ChatGPT. And I'm not structured. I'm just like, what are some of the key points that I should bring up if I'm going to talk to the president of streaming at, QVC? And I get back some key points about that company and their profile and the person that I'm gonna be talking to. So it's been a huge help for me, for my team. I'm going and doing a forecasting, account planning meeting with my team next week. I need an agenda for that meeting. In 2 seconds, I got my agenda for my meeting, and then I can take that and I can make it my own and I can do what I need to do with it. I told you all that I'm also a teacher at Georgetown, right? A lot of the universities were putting a lot of blocks on AI, right? I tell my students all the time, embrace it, leverage it, use it, right? Don't cheat. Give credit to where you need to give credit, right? But sometimes you need inspiration in sales and everything that it is that you do. And with where we're going with AI, you can reduce the stress of I'm going into this meeting or I'm trying to write this paper or I don't know anything about a specific topic. Use technology to help you, to inspire you, to help you do more with less.
I agree completely with that, Danielle. I would say I've leveraged it in similar ways, and one of the things I think that it can also do for you sometimes, and I'm sure you all have this, right? You have those days where there's a million and one things running through your mind, and it's just sort of difficult to sit down and organize your thoughts. To Danielle's point, leveraging that can help streamline things. One of the things I wanted to touch on, and Danielle, you kind of referenced this in passing when you were talking about your students a little bit, which is the ethics around AI. I think, there's been a lot of conversation, I think, both in, news media and in politics and a lot of different spheres around, how are we thinking about making AI ethical? And I'm happy to start the conversation there, and I know you all have thoughts as well, but I know one of the things at Microsoft we've been very focused on, and I can share the links out or talk to you guys about where you can find this information afterwards, but we've spent a lot of time thinking about what's the impact this is going to have on different communities. Many of us, especially those of us that are diverse senior leaders, have already raised how are we thinking about how this could impact communities of color? And so, we're doing a number of things. So one, we have our responsible AI principles. We have, a framework that we've launched. I will hold this up. Happy to let you guys know where to find this. You can download it online, but it's basically a blueprint that we've been sharing with stakeholders, politicians, partners around how can you make sure that AI is ethical, how can you use it ethically? Because there's a piece of this that I think there's an onus on technology companies, but there's also a piece on this goes to your point, Danielle, around how individual users leverage the technology, right? And so those are some of the things that we're doing. I wanted to talk a little bit about the skilling aspect of this, because I know, and Rashida, I was thinking about your point around your 77-year-old aunt, and I think this has certainly been true of my family. I've gotten those calls like, I don't even know where to begin with this. Like, why would I use this, right? And
Right.
I think there is an aspect and a dimension here where you sort of have to just start getting your feet wet. And so I think I would offer the audience, there's so many different things, whether you want to go to LinkedIn Learning, there are trainings that Microsoft offers, there's more that we're going to be doing in the skilling space and putting out there. If you just want to learn more about how to use the technology, if you're just curious about it, I think there's a nice point at which to start there, because it does become a little less intimidating, I think, as you begin to use it more.
Yeah.
With that, I wanted to talk with you guys. Danielle, you look like you want to say something else.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to talk to you guys. What are you as you work with stakeholders, particularly stakeholders in the sales community, what are some of the areas that you would say folks are really concerned about, or that there are two areas that, if you had to pick one or two, that you think sales leaders should all be sort of skilled up in as it relates to AI?
A couple of areas that I think people should be skilled in. I think you kind of hit it earlier, right? It's understanding, and there's so many resources that are out there to help you understand what AI is and how you can leverage it. And actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to just pivot back to what you were talking about earlier when you were referring to ethics, right? When we think about AI, and even when I was telling you some of the ways that I use it, like I've had some customers say, like, oh, I used ChatGPT to help me write my board summary. And like for me, it's almost like people feel like you've gotta like say that you're using it, and you don't have to do that, right? It's if you're coming out there and you're showing up like a badass, show up like a badass, and don't feel like you've got to be like, oh, well, I used ChatGPT to write this, or I used AI to go in, confident, and I'm pivoting just a little bit, because when you got me on the ethics part of it, and even when I think about, my students and how they're leveraging and using AI, we're trying to build pipeline, we're trying to grow, I'm trying to make my number. So if there's something that's out there that's gonna help me, what I'm gonna do is infuse myself into that technology. And one of the things that you can do to skill yourself up is to use it. Like, you don't have to use what we use at Microsoft. Use something that's going to help you be the biggest and best seller, salesperson, or whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's sales or whether it's something else that you're doing. Embrace technology to help you get to where you want to go, right? That's and there's so many different ways that you can learn. You can learn for free if you want to go and take training on it, or look at the blueprint that he's got that you can leverage too. So that's what I would say at its most basic is just learn the technology and use it.
Yeah, I'll frame it a couple of different ways. I think first of all, a lot of times when we think about AI technology, we go first to this concept of it's a replacement of something. And I think it's really important to think about it as an augmentation of skill set. How do you leverage the technology to do it better, to do it faster, to be your best? How do you use the technology, for example, to train your sales force? How do you make sure that your sales force is your best salesperson? So if you look at the qualities of your best salesperson, how do you leverage the technology to make sure that everyone has that? Right? Typically, how you would do that today is, I'm going to sign you up with a mentor. I want you to do shadowing. And so how do we leverage the technology really from an augmentation perspective, I think is really critical. At Microsoft, we use this term called co-pilot, right? Which essentially, and Danielle sort of referenced it as my virtual assistant. But we really believe of having your assistant, your virtual co-pilot being with you every step of the way allows you to bring more value end-to-end to whatever you're doing, whether that's an application, it is a tool, or it is a process. So I think fundamentally that's really important, because I think that when we go first to replacement, right, it becomes a doomsday conversation, and it shouldn't be, right? And like I said, I've been in this technology, this era for a really long time, and I've only seen it advance to be able to help us drive intelligence or embed intelligence into our tools, improve our processes, improve what we're doing. So I think that's fundamentally reframing how we think about it, I think is extremely important. And I think for me, I always say, I think Micah was talking to you about this, I think that we've learned as a society how to usher in technologies or change. So think about when I wasn't born yet, but when we ushered in automobiles, we moved from walking and horses to, modern views of transportation. we evolved that over time. We learned how to usher that in. What do we need? The regulations that we have today in the automotive industry, we didn't have them right out of the gate. So we're going to learn as we go. We look at the internet. We look at our cell phones. We've learned how to usher in safely and responsibly these technologies as they've advanced. And I look at AI in the same way from a responsibility perspective. Like, there's a lot that we still don't know. There's a lot that we still have to learn. There's a lot of innovation that needs to continue to exist. And quite frankly, as I look at it from an enterprise perspective, there's much more that we need to be doing in terms of leveraging AI in our mission critical applications. I still speak to clients daily where AI is the side project. It's in the innovation lab. And so what's happening now is they're having real conversations to say, how do I really embed this in my day-to-day? And how do I make sure it's truly critical to my key operations? And I think when we start thinking from that perspective, we're going to continue to see an exponential step change of the change management, the adoption, the talent management, the scaling of the technology. And to your point around scaling, I think prior to, say, 10 years ago, or even 5 years, or even 3 years ago, we talked about scaling from the perspective of just data science skills, the technical skills. Now, we really need to think about it from the perspective of, I like to call it T-shaped skills, the depth of understanding the technology, but the breadth of the function, because I like to say AI is an and, it is not an or. You're actually transforming a business process at the end of the day. If you think about it only from the perspective of the feature, the tool, what it can do, you're diminishing actually the impact that you can have on your organization. So ultimately, we should be thinking about this as we are transforming a business process, we're transforming the tools, we're transforming how we do what we do best. And it's a very small nuance, but it's a very, very important one in terms of how we actually scale the technology in the long term. And then how we look at the skill sets, because in that particular case, it's not just about technical skills, it's about functional skills, it's about change management skills, it's about domain expertise. If you're transforming a process in wealth management, it's really important to make sure that you have wealth managers, right, that are part of that process to really ensure that you are looking at that process from all angles and your implementation is surfaced into the user in the right way. And so I think that's a really important designation when we think about skills, because I think so far the conversation has always been about the technical skills that we bring to bear, and we've got to take a step back and actually see that it's much more end-to-end, given the impact that it has.
I think that's great. Rashida. I mean, I think one piece I would just add to the great comments that you all had is I think, when you're leveraging the technology, when you're using the technology, one of the advantages beyond sort of just growing your own skill set, if I use something like our M365 Copilot, for instance, we look at the feedback that comes from consumers, we look at the feedback that comes from customers, and it allows us to innovate, to further tweak and refine technology. And so I would just throw that out to you all too. I think we have the ability, not only within our organization, but I think as a community, as a professional group, we have the ability to also influence the technology a little bit by leveraging it, providing the feedback. And we've gotten some direct feedback on some of it. And I think it's good, right? Because it allows us to continue to make sure that we're producing technology that's inclusive, that we're producing technology that's going to be the most useful that it possibly can be for folks.
Yeah, I think one thing I will add to what you said, you triggered a thought, is I think a lot of times when we think about AI, for some reason, we just say it's for a certain group of people. Mm-hmm. And I think we're sort of going to move into the age of, many of your companies probably do this every year, you have to take compliance education. Everyone should have this level of education. I think AI, everyone should have a base fundamental level of education of how the technology works, how the technology doesn't work because I also work with clients every day that come with really interesting ideas. And I said, that is a really interesting, impactful idea, but I have a great analytic solution for that. It has nothing to do with AI, right? And so I think really educating, everyone on the technology, how they should be using it, I think is going to be really important. Just like how we're all trained on how we should be using our computers, what we should be using it for in the workforce. I think fundamentally that level of democratization and understanding is going to be really critical.
So I'm curious, for those in the audience, who has leveraged some form of AI?
No, great.
Who has not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we're boring y'all. We're telling y'all stuff you already know, right? You're like, we got this. Just kidding.
Well, one of the things I wanted to pivot to, I think, we've laid a good foundation in terms of the framework and talking about some of the skilling that's necessary. I'd like to talk a little bit about what are the insights, particularly from you both who are, steeped in working with customers, steeped in working with some of our key partners. I'd like to sort of get from each of you, what do you see as on the horizon, one or two big things that you think sales professionals are going to have to navigate within the coming years? I'm mindful that, just as we mentioned earlier, this year sort of moved incredibly quickly on AI, so that these comments may change, in another 6 months, but I'm curious at this point in time. So Danielle, maybe I'll start with you and then I'll go to Rashida.
Yeah, I said it at the beginning and I said I hate it, but I keep saying it, right? I think that the doing more with less is here to stay. And it's just it's our reality. And so for me, I'm trying to figure out how do I survive in that space? If I never get back to the point as a sales leader of getting my staffing levels the way that I need them to, my company's not going to reduce their expectations of the amount of revenue that I'm going to be bringing in. That's not changing, right? Even though I have less resources, I got a bigger number this year, right? I was mad too. I was mad, right? I was hot. But I said, you know what? I'm going to dig in and I'm going to figure out, I'm going to crush this number. But then it kind of makes you think, well, shoot, if I do it, then they're going to think, why am I going to give her more people? Because she's able to do it with less, so why should I give her more people? But so I can't keep myself stuck there. Again, it feels a little bit repetitive, but that's why leveraging the technology, and the technology is going to continue to evolve. We're talking about Copilot, right? When I can't wait for Copilot to come out. And can I just tell you, I don't have access to it, and I'm mad about that, right? We're getting it out there, and we're making room for it for our customers, but I cannot wait for Copilot. Like, that's going to be infused in our entire productivity suite. For me, that's going to be like game-changing. That virtual assistant that I'm going to have so that I can, again, the ability to prep for a customer meeting. And for me as a seller, there's no better feeling than when you walk into a meeting, power outfit, power sneaks, right? And when I'm mentally ready, oh my gosh, I just feel like there's nothing, and I hope some of you can feel me, right? When it can be, emotional. You can be nervous when you're going in to sit in front of a CEO or president, CIO for the first time. You're like, oh my God, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? How am I going to land this deal? And I got this number that I'm worried about, right? But having technology that, and I was telling somebody this earlier, I literally sit down and I have a conversation with my AI assistant. That's what I'm going to call it, right? And I go back and forth about different thoughts. And I ask for different points. And what that does is it brings a sense of calm to me, right? It helps me go in there and not only have the power outfit, but have the power points, right? Right? And to be able to go in and have a conversation with a customer and feel confident about it, because I needed some inspiration and I was able to get that. Right? I'm not spending hours and weeks looking at a blank sheet of paper, trying to figure out what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do, or how am I going to come up with those points. I can get those points in 30 seconds, so I can spend more time focusing on taking that conversation to a completely different level. So I'm apologize if I didn't completely go into that. I know we're talking about the future, but knowing that every one of you are here in a sales conference, right? I challenge you, maybe you're already doing it because most of the audience has leveraged AI in a certain way, but AI is a thing right now. There's gonna be something else coming later on in the future, right? And so while the do more with less, I'm doing more with less, but I'm also taking care of my mental and also leaving more space for me to focus on my kids and my students and all of the things that I have to do as a wife and a mother and a daughter and a friend, right? AI is helping me to do more with less all around.
Love that.
Yeah, and unlike Danielle, I do not use AI every day. But go girl. Listen, I think, so here's how I think about it. Especially from a customer orientation perspective, I think there are a couple of trends. So, one is, and I'm still trying to refine this thought process, but, this perspective of AI is the new IT. And what I mean by that is 50 years ago, there wasn't sort of the CIO. We didn't think about sort of the CIO's office and what that means. It's actually started with database management. And that has evolved over the last 40 to 50 years in large organizations in terms of how we manage the technology data estate. And so my vision is that AI will be just as transformative as as we look at sort of the IT infrastructure where new departments, new roles, new processes will be created that we have not even imagined. And so for me, I think that's a huge sign of the meaningful exponential impact that it will have on how we do business, how we do commerce, and how the IT landscape changes over time. So I think that's one. I think the second thing from a client perspective is, look, many of you work with clients today that still are running very heavy legacy on-prem applications are part of their business. And what I tell clients every day is, you do not get the permission to innovate unless you migrate to the cloud. Because, oh, by the way, these new innovations will never be on-prem. They are in the cloud. I mean, if you look at the amount of innovation that has happened in the space of AI over the last 6 months, it happened in the cloud. And there are many industries, from financial services to healthcare to government, where customers have been very reluctant on making that shift to the cloud. That is going to be very impactful. I mean, we talk about AI like every client is using it already and everyone is on the cloud. It's not the case. So that is going to be a big shift in clients saying, okay, how do I really do this? I want to get involved. I was just in the Middle East a couple months ago, and I was talking to this client who was telling me they're using these services to write bedtime stories. And it was interesting. I mean, we were having this meeting, and at some point I had to say, this is really interesting, and I'm so glad you're in tune with the technology, but you're not going to get any of this benefit from this technology because you're not on Microsoft's cloud. That's called Azure. So why don't we have that conversation? And so I think as sales professionals, we have to be bolder in being a trusted advisor with our clients to say, let me tell you the things that you actually have to do so that you can reap the benefits of the technology. A lot of times, we say, oh, well, here's what the client wants. We have to sort of shift our approach moving forward to be more trusted in our perspective of how do we onboard you to this innovation journey? How do we teach you how to be able to get the benefits of this journey? So I think that's a muscle that I think as sales professionals we're going to have to build because it's sort of different. Then it's more back to my earlier point on it's an and versus an or. It's not just I'm selling something to you because it's business process, it's business transformation. And really having that end-to-end conversation with the client I think is going to be increasingly important. And then I think the other shift that we're going to make is I think we're this concept of just bringing comfort to the technology. I think the example, are you guys familiar with the TI-89 calculator? Yes?
Everyone.
Okay. So I explained AI as my TI-89 calculator. When I was in college, I never left home without it. Okay? And so I had all my formulas plugged in. Every time I stuffed as much as I could in there. But when I had to take my test, I had to use judgment. Which formula did I have to use, right? When and where? And so I think for me, those examples really help us to think about how the technology should be used as augmentation of a skill set, of value, because when I had my T89 calc, no one ever said, oh, Rashida, you're not using your brain. Right? And so I was using my brain, but I was using judgment. I had the information accessible to me, but I had to bring the judgment and the perspective of when to use it. And so for me, I'm a simple person. Like when I think about, AI, and I really talk to clients around how they should be democratizing it, how to get rid of the fear, because I'm a very optimist in the technology. I think using those examples like that really help, and I think we've got to continue to really talk about the technology in that way and bring forward examples of the technology in that way so that we can have more curiosity, we can then also increase more applicability in everything that we do on a daily basis.
That's great. Rashida, I want to pick up on one of the things that you talked about with judgment, right? Because I think when we talk about sort of ethics and AI piece, that's where the judgment comes in, right? And we've talked about it a lot internally as an organization, but I wanted to just, with this group of folks, knowing we've got people at different places in their organization, some are sales leaders, some may be up and coming sales leaders, what are things that organizational sales leaders or aspiring sales leaders should be thinking about in terms of setting the tone around ethics and AI? I'll start by saying, for me, whenever I think about anything ethical, right, and pulling it back out of AI and just talking in general, I think there's a tone at the top piece, right? And so I think, if you're leading a sales organization, I think one of the most important things is hitting up on the point that you raised around judgment. It's encouraging people to use good judgment. It's encouraging people when they're not sure to, pause, think, ask questions, seek out resources. But I'm curious from you both, what are you thinking about in that space?
I think from my perspective, I would look at it, from multiple frames. I think, one, look, regardless of the technology, we all have to have judgment. We have our cell phones, we need to use it responsibly. We have the internet, we need to use it responsibly. I'm not sure why when we talk about AI, we think about it in a different way. And so I think we should stop doing that, right? Because again, back to this point, if you change the frame of, AI is a technology that augments our skill set, first and foremost, I think then you can have a different conversation. So I really think that frame is so fundamental because it really allows us to approach the problem and approach a perspective in a much different way. I think also to my earlier point that I made in terms of, look, we all have to be curious. So all of us have to learn about the technology. And that has not been the case. Up to 6 months ago, 9 months ago, the appetite for the conversation was not there. I can tell you, in my role, I cover, everything from relational databases to open source databases to analytics to AI. And 9 months ago, clients were not having an AI conversation with me. It was a very different conversation. So now that you have all opted in, okay, and no one wants to have FOMO, we're having the conversation. But I think we need to be having the right conversation, because I was with a customer recently and they said, Rashida, I've got to use AI. My board told me I got to use AI. And I said, oh my God, you're giving me heartburn. I said, that is the wrong perspective, right? Back to my point relative to, let's not force fit that's technology, but really look at, like with anything that we're doing, what is the problem that we are trying to solve? What is the innovation that we are trying to bring forward? And then what is the best way to be able to solve that? And so I think how we frame it, I think how we build skills around it, I think how we talk about the usage of it, I think is important. And I think as sales professionals, you are all in a very, very critical spot because there's, again, a lot of us are not at the same level in terms of what the technology can do, what it can't do. And clients are really looking at you to arm them with that perspective in a trusted manner of helping them. I like to call it, how do you help them get on the treadmill and stay there? Right? And so you have to be curious, you have to opt in. And a lot of times with sales professionals say, oh, I'm not technical, I need to bring my technical person. No, like you have to realize that the skill set is relevant for you to understand so that you can help your clients ultimately be successful. And that's what they are expecting from you. So get out of the perspective of it's just for the technical people, it's just for the data scientists. No, it's back to that T-shaped skill, understanding the depth of the technology, what it can do, but also how it can be transformative for your customer.
That's great. That's great.
What she said. She hit it. She hit it.
Well, along those lines, and just before we start to, transition a little bit into kind of, final thoughts, are there additional, we've talked about skilling, we've talked about ethics a little bit. Are there additional, as you guys look at each of your practices, are there additional steps, and maybe, Rashida, picking up on your point a little bit around your conversation with your client, are there things that organizations should and should not be doing as they're looking at get your roller. Are there additional things that organizations should and should not be doing as they look at how they, and Rashida, to your point, maybe not just AI, but all sorts of technology?
I think, bless you.
Okay.
You okay? Okay. I think, and not to sort of give a Microsoft pitch, but, at Microsoft, we have our responsible, AI principles. And I think the good thing is that we didn't create these things 6 months ago. They've been around for several years, and many companies have them as well. And I think that's important. I think us having the conversation of how are we transparent with the technology? What are the privacy and security principles that we need to have? How do we hold individuals accountable as the technology is built and used is something that we're going to need to continue to advance across the board, which I think is important. And I think we're going to learn that advancement is going to come as we continue to apply the technology, and most importantly, apply the technology large scale. Because as I mentioned before, there's still a lot of clients that sort of have AI in this innovation bucket. My innovation team, my innovation lab, they're the AI folks. Like, no.
Yeah.
Like, it needs to be mainstream. Your critical applications, you should be embedding intelligence and leveraging intelligence there. And so, I think that us all getting grounded on that, I think, is important. And look, I think one other thing that we don't talk about a lot, which I am super passionate about, is really ensuring that the builders of this technology is inclusive and diverse, which is really important. Like, it's a technology that is using data. If your data is biased, if your data is not inclusive, you're reinforcing inequalities that exist. And so we've got to make sure that the people that are building the technology, that are influencing responsible AI practices, is as colorful and as beautiful as this room. And that's not the case. Okay? And that goes back into our curriculums as well, to make sure all schools are teaching these principles and embedded them in their technology, and not just the engineering programs, but our social sciences program as well. Because back to my earlier point, it's an and, it is not an or. Let's not look at the technology as feature and function. And so I really think that we have, I think there's some, I can't think about it, but I feel like when you talk about AI, there's sort of like this like ego thing that a human being has, like, oh my God, like something can be smarter than me, that can do something better than me. Like, I'm not so sure about that, right? And, you know, where we sort of kind of put it in a box that it shouldn't be. And I think this concept of truly embracing the technology and opted in is going to be really critical for us to get to the right next stage and the right next level, especially now that it's more accessible and consumable than it has ever been before. We've got to take advantage of that, you know, accessibility. And I think there's going to be, I was at a McKinsey session recently, and I really like the way they framed it. They said, if I can remember now, they said there's going to be sort of takers of the technology, so enterprises that are going to use the technology and use platforms like Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, et cetera. There are going to be, you know, shapers, you know, of the technology, you know, those that will continue to sort of shape the advancement. There's going to be makers of the technology. And so there are some people that are going to be, you know, making these applications. There's some that's going to leverage it, you know, across the board. And, you know, some of them it's going to create it. And I think that continuum is going to change over time. And I think enterprises are trying to also figure out, like, where do I sit on the continuum, you know, of that landscape? And quite frankly, a lot of clients don't know, and that's okay. But I think the importance of that is why we need to make sure that we opt in, we're curious, we're informed regularly, because the pace of technology and innovation right now is moving so fast that we can be a good steward in advising our clients on that journey. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I love that point, Rashida. And I think, you know, one thing I would add too is I think if you have an opportunity and you're sitting around the table, right, and this is coming up or you're being asked to be sort of that, you know, I guess positive agitator, right, around, you know, where are there opportunities? Because I think, and I loved your point around how it has to be integrated throughout, because one of the things I think I hear when I talk to peers at other companies is, you know, well, you know we need to train on AI a little bit, but no one really understands it, so we're just not going to do it. And I'm like, well, I mean, if you don't start somewhere, right? How do you skill up people? How do you provide, you know, guardrails to people? How do you help people understand what's possible, what's not possible? And so I think I love your point, because I think there is a little bit of, you know, being willing to just take that step, lean in, and have the conversation. Danielle, I'm curious, what are you thinking? If you're good.
Test, okay, thank you. So first, I'm sitting here in this embarrassing moment of this tickle.
No. It's happened to all of us.
I have absolutely no clue what the question was because I have literally been sitting here going, dear Lord, can you please make this tickle in my throat go away? So I'm not even gonna ask you, can we ask them what questions they have? Does the audience have any questions for us?
Absolutely.
I would love to just talk with some folks and dialogue and pray that I stop coughing.
Yes, absolutely.
I see a hand right there.
Oh, hello. This conversation was great. It's so inspiring I felt like in a way you were pitching to us to use AI, and it kind of gave me, I felt like I was in a sales room with you and I was a customer, and I got a view of how you sell things. So it gave me a perspective of how to better frame things. I work for Google and we work in AI as well. And I think I struggle articulating the value of AI, and you did that so eloquently. So I really want to thank you for that. It just gave me a perspective of selling. I spoke way more than I wanted to. So now to my question. I was reading a book this morning called Split the Difference, which one of my mentors recommended to me. And it was speaking about negotiating. And it made me really curious more about how people negotiate. So my question is, could you give us an example of one of your best negotiations with a customer, how you worked through it? Maybe they were difficult, they were saying no. How did you work through that? Thank you.
Okay. Is it for me or Danielle? Okay. Are you ready to go?
I got this.
We get it together. I can kick it off. So being in a situation where I'm in a tough negotiation with a customer, experienced it many a times. And some of you heard me speak earlier in the week, and I said that I actually hate the word pitch. I never, no offense to your question at all, but I never go into a customer situation pitching to them. I go into customer situations with empathy. I go in to understand who my customers are. I want to make an emotional connection with my customer. So when I get to that point where we're having a tough conversation, they're not having a conversation with Microsoft, they're having a conversation with Danielle Estrada. And so I'm able to, sometimes you got to say no. Sometimes you got to say no. And I think as I see many sellers, they're afraid to say no. They always want to say yes. And the answer isn't always yes. But if you do the work to make an emotional connection with your customer, that negotiation is never tough. It's a conversation. It's transparent and it's honest. And I will be the first to tell a customer, look, if you don't want to go with me, I respect that. I'm not going to beg you. You want to go another route, go another route. And you know what happens? Every single time, they end up coming back our way. They end up coming back our way because I'm not pitching. As a seller, all the things that I'm doing, the point that I'm trying to make to you is all of the things that I do leading up to that negotiation enables me and equips me to have that, what for many people would feel like a tough conversation, as a natural conversation. Got anything to add?
You're back.
I know.
Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you all for the mints, the cough drops, the prayers, the water. To the technical team for cutting off my mic, looking at my cues. I appreciate you all.
I mean, I agree with everything that she said. I think what's important is I think clients appreciate when you are transparent with them. And so for me, I've worked across the life cycle of sales. I've been in services as well. And one of the things I actually learned in services, being on the implementation side versus just on the sales side, is how important trust is. Really telling clients what is feasible and what is not, and they really respect that.
Absolutely.
And so that's a skill I picked up, delivering services once folks like Danielle have really went off to the next thing, and I'm the one that has to show up every week and deliver. Just really having good clarity around that. Clients really respect and really honor. And so I think be long-term in your thinking and your approach, and you will be successful in the short term.
That's great.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Right here.
Thank you so much. I'm learning so much from you all. So I just want to say it's amazing thus far. And I know it's going to continue to be amazing here at this CIS Summit. So my name is Marie, and I work at LinkedIn. So we are definitely in track with Microsoft here. I have a question more geared towards like campaign management. I'm a senior client solutions manager. So from like a AI perspective, want to know like from a broader lens, how are you looking at AI in relations to like coming up with recommendations for campaign performance where our clients can see insight recaps in the AI itself? Just wanting to get a sense of how we are able to provide better recommendations quickly for our clients from a campaign performance perspective or any data insights.
I'll answer it in two places. If you're talking about it from a Microsoft portfolio perspective, we're continuing to enhance all of our productivity tools and offers to our clients to really infuse that technology. I think recommendations is something that we continue to evolve from an industry perspective. It's a use case that customers ask about all the time. We've been using AI in things like, next best action, recommendation analysis for quite a long time. I think the next step of that is sort of what I talked about earlier, is like, how do you summarize a lot of that information? How do you generate content? So I think as an industry, whether it's Microsoft or it's other technology providers or other solutions, I think we're going to continue to see an advancement in tool sets from that perspective.
That's great. And then I think there's a question right here.
Thank you. My name is April Marks from GitLab. I was curious, when you're doing like enterprise sales, you're typically involving someone from product management, someone from marketing or customer success. So do you have examples when you're talking to your clients and ready to close big deals, have AI have brought the team together versus creating like a silo?
Your question is using AI to bring the teams together? I haven't really thought about it, not from an AI perspective, just I think more in general when we're trying to close in on any type of a deal. I want to have the best and brightest with me, right? And so sometimes I think from one of the things that we run into quite often is everyone has FOMO, right? Everybody wants to be able to take that credit and say they were part of closing that deal. And in my honest opinion, I think sometimes you got to be willing to take a step back, right? Everybody has a contribution to closing in on that deal. And whether it's you sitting in the room right then and there when they say yes and they're going to sign, does that really matter, right? And so I'm not leveraging AI in that way, but just as a leader and making sure that we have the right talent that needs to be in the room at the right time. And then I'm not afraid to kick everybody else out when I need to kick everybody else out at that time, if that's what's going to be best for the relationship, right? And again, it's going back to what I was saying earlier. If you do all that legwork and you're truly not just focused in on closing the deal and in on the sale, but I plan to make lifelong relationships and connections because I talk to people that have been my customer. They're people that poached me and wanted me to come work for them. Those relationships are important. So I'm not staying so focused in on closing a sale, but making those relationships. And oh my God, I'm about to lose it again and start coughing. So having the right people.
Over to you, Rashida.
I think you nailed it. The only thing I would say is I would probably answer the question a little bit differently. I would say, back to my earlier point that it's not about the technology, it's about the transformation. So to me, you don't need AI for that, right? You need to be honestly telling your customer, here are the functions that I need to show up so that we can have a valuable conversation. And I think back to my earlier point, we've got to be bold about guiding our clients on what they can do. I mean, I was talking to a client the other day who wanted to go down this path of, large language models with me. You don't need to talk about large language models. Let me tell you what you need to talk about. We already have the large language model available, and by the way, it is pretty darn good, right? Now let's talk about how you apply it, right, and how we implement it. So to my point, you don't need AI for that conversation. We just need to be bold in having confidence on guiding the customer down the path that they need to go to and being really clear that this is not just a development conversation. It's a conversation about transformation. So, oh, by the way, make sure that these other functions show up to this meeting.
Great question. Just because we're getting close on time, I wanted to offer a chance for Rashida, Danielle. I'll make closing thoughts too, and then we'll be around afterwards too if folks want to ask questions. So, Rashida, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say be informed and be curious. I think it is really important. The technology is moving at a fast pace, and you need to be a part of it, particularly people that look like us. We need to be a part of it because we're not there. We're not there. So embrace the technology. I think the second thing is, like I mentioned, it's for everyone. You don't have to be technical to have an understanding of AI. So you need to ensure that you opt in. And oh, by the way, it's going to change the world. It is here. It is not coming, right? To play off my favorite coach, Coach Prime. AI isn't coming, right? It is here, right? It is here. It is not going to change. So make sure that you are opting in and you are building your skill set so that you can be competitive moving forward. Because if not, you will not be able to opt in because you will be opted out.
Agreed.
So I would just say in closing for me, I think Rashida hit it well on AI, so I'm not going to keep going down that path. But just for you all that are either curious about getting into a sales role or getting into something different, I tell everyone that I mentor and I coach, be ready, stay ready, right? I've been carrying around, I carry this around with me everywhere I go. Throw away the paper business cards. Throw them away. Technology is here. This is my business card. I tap, I've got my QR code, I'm always ready. Get those LinkedIn profiles updated, get them ready. If you don't have your profile picture on your LinkedIn profile, put it out there. And it shouldn't be the one where you were coming out of the club or looking whatever, all right? We need that professional profile photo on your LinkedIn page, and we need you to be ready because you never know what opportunity is going to drop into your lap. It could be a new sale, it could be a new relationship, it could be a new job. I told everybody the other night, Danielle is working on what's next for Danielle. I want somebody else to come take my job because I'm ready to take the next one at the next level.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Again, be ready, stay ready. Those are my closing thoughts, you guys.
That's awesome. And then I would just offer to you guys, this is a huge time of opportunity. I'm guilty of this, but don't do the thing where you don't think you have anything to offer, you don't know it, you don't understand it. Right now is the time to bring those ideas forward, you know? I had an idea incubation session with someone the other day, and they shot me an email this morning. They're like, hey, we're running with this. We're running this up the chain. It just came from that one conversation, right? Like, this is now going to be a bigger thing. There's going to be a bigger initiative behind it. You never know what idea you might have that might take off. And this is, to Danielle's point, to Rashida's point, this is the time to do that. So before we close, I want to thank Michelle Ward-McGee, who's sitting out here in the audience, who has been helping us the last several weeks as we've been organizing for today. So thank you, Michelle, and thank you all for your participation and the great questions.
Lately, you may have noticed artificial intelligence helping people create amazing things, solve complex problems, and inspire communities to imagine more. But you might be surprised to know that while AI has been accelerating at a faster pace these days, Microsoft has been responsibly developing AI for a long time, like for decades. Microsoft is using breakthroughs in AI to make life easier for us in everyday ways that you might not even realize. Background noise suppression on calls? That's AI. Using Microsoft Designer to help create a birthday invite? That's AI. Translating meetings? That's AI too. And that's just on an individual level. Microsoft AI is helping businesses boost manufacturing operations, improve customer service, and prevent fraud. Microsoft AI is also helping customers work on some of society's greatest challenges: sustainable farming, digital literacy, and more. But it's also important to develop this tech responsibly. Our goal is to democratize AI and machine learning so everyone can develop, use, and benefit from AI innovation. The next year will be one of the most exciting and innovative yet, leading us to places that now we can only imagine. Imagine more with Microsoft AI.